that police officer made the decision they had to make, and that's fine, but it still can be questioned.
Okay, and that's fair enough. Again, I'm not.
You don't have. Yeah, I don't feel you have any expectation of just having no decision made on anything you do.
Okay, fair enough.
Particularly if you're a government employee.
Okay. What is the distinction between a government employee and a private employee?
There's more responsibility.
Okay.
For a government employee.
Okay. One of the statements is, I do not trust the police. And you circled strongly disagree. So you trust the police?
I do. I do.
You were asked a series of questions about both the Black Lives Matter.
Could I go back to that for a second?
Of course.
I do trust the police, but part of the reason I trust the police is because I know they're checks. They're checks to what they do, and I trust those checks. I trust them. I have faith in the system.
Okay. And there are some other questions about that I'm going to ask you because.
Okay.
Okay. And I really appreciate that.
Okay.
So you were asked a couple of questions about the Black Lives Matter, whether it's movement or organization or one or the other, as well as Blue Lives Matter, organization and or movement.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And you have a very favorable view of the Black Lives Matter. And you write that it carries on the tradition of civil rights activists of the past and their struggle.
That's my perception, yeah.
And you continue to hold that belief?
I do. I'm ashamed to say I don't know enough about it, though.
Okay.
I'm not involved in it.
And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you had a somewhat unfavorable opinion of them. And you wrote, I don't understand how anyone could view the police, Blue Lives, as somehow threatened or endangered when they are well armed and have all the power in most situations. I'm baffled by it.
Yeah, I'd say suspicious of. I guess I just, yeah.
Okay.
I just didn't compute for me.
Okay. You have a background in history.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. I think you're.
That might be overstating it.
You have a degree in history?
Yeah.
Okay. You have a lawyer in your family who actually lives, you share a practice or something with?
Yeah, that's my relative to my wife. Yeah.
Okay. She no longer practices law?
No.
Okay. Would you, if you were to serve as a juror in this case, would you knock on the door and ask to talk about the law with her?
I wish I could.
Okay.
I came so close to telling her. I just stopped myself as I read that last sentence or whatever. Yeah. I'd love to talk to her about it, but
yeah,
I'm not going to.
Your father was a physician, right?
Yes.
And your wife is a nurse?
Yes.
Okay. So if there were to be medical evidence presented in this case, would you, I don't know, I may put my foot in my mouth, but is your father still alive?
No, he passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry. So with your wife, if there's medical evidence and you're trying to think, I don't understand how this works, would you go home at night and ask her about?
It would be tempting, but I don't think I would, no.
Okay. Can you promise us you won't?
I can promise you I won't. Yeah, it would.
So I've got just a few more questions for you, sir. And I really appreciate, again, your time. The last couple of questions I have are on your opinions regarding the justice system generally. And you were asked a question, do you believe that the jury system in this country is fair? Why or why not? And you write, although no system is infallible, when it comes to making a judgment as consequential as denying someone his or her freedom, I believe that being tried before 12 of your peers provides a fairness that wouldn't be there without a jury.
Yeah.
Good answer.
I amazed myself. Yeah.
Explain, like what's the difference between no jury and a jury? Like, why do you see that as such a benefit?
I have to admit I'm weak on the law. I'm weak on this subject. So, and even since I wrote that, I've learned more about. I don't think I even knew it had to be unanimous when I wrote that. Or I mean, I've kind of picking up things about. So, what's your question again?
I just was wondering, what do you think the benefit of having a jury
over just having the judge decide?
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to put down judges.
You're getting
It's just that independence from the government, from just this independent entity,
right,
that doesn't belong to the police department or to the county. It's an independent. I think that's
fair enough.
What I'd say.
Okay. So again, I want to read to you two of your responses again, and then kind of circle back on some stuff. So again, it asks, the question was, under our system of justice, defendants are presumed innocent of the criminal charges against them.
Yeah.
Would you have difficulty following this principle of law? And your response again was, in a case with as much publicity as this case, it is difficult.
Yeah.
Based upon the visual evidence I have seen, I haven't presumed the defendant is innocent.
Right.
But I know I have only seen and read a small fraction of what occurred. Knowing this, I believe I can presume innocence until all facts are presented to the jury. Okay. So I want you to think about that. I'm going to read you another one of your responses.
Okay.
The question was, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you said yes.
Yes.
And you said, it asks, why do you feel that way about serving as a juror in this case? And you wrote, I am marking yes because I want to look in the mirror every morning and know the person looking back at me wasn't afraid to do the right thing when called upon.
That's right.
I believe I would make a good juror for many reasons, but I will leave it up to others. And you kind of go on from there. I mean, not much. I can read the rest if you want.
No.
Okay. So it strikes me, sir, that you have taken your obligation as a potential juror remarkably seriously. I'm telling you that. And I think you've reflected, right? So you've acknowledged that once you saw the bystander video,
right,
you did not presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, right?
No. I mean, I was,
right? So you didn't presume him innocent. And also you have some very strongly held opinions, which again, it's your right to have those opinions. And I may agree or disagree with some of them.
Yeah.
The point being is that in view of your personal beliefs, right? You've acknowledged that you didn't presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, and you have concern about doing the right thing when called upon. Can you honestly say to us, I can put all of these things aside. I can follow the law. I can listen to the evidence. I can apply the evidence to the law and make a decision. Can you do that? Free from all of your other opinions.
Yeah, that last question about was the most difficult one. And I've thought about it a lot, and, you know, I don't aspire to be on the jury. That was not it's not a goal or dream of mine. But I wanted to, what I want to say, I know this isn't answering your last question, but it's my willingness to do it shouldn't be a factor in deciding if I'm willing to do, I'm totally willing to, so that's getting that, but that's not the important part. The important part is, do I think I could do it? And I do think I can do it.
Okay. So thinking you can do it and knowing you can do it are two different things.
You're right.
Right?
You're right. You know, that's true.
So if you're sitting here and you're listening to the evidence, right? And you've already had your opinion influenced by what you've seen in the past. Do you think it may affect your opinions about all of these things we've talked about? May harm my client because you're focusing on your opinion about police reform or defunding the police. Will you look at the evidence as a blank slate?
No, I respect that. I respect yeah, I take this very seriously. And yeah, I really think the answer is yes, I could. If you do your job well and you show me evidence, I definitely, that thing is when yeah.
But I don't have to show you evidence.
Oh, or not you, whatever. If I see evidence, I'm sorry. But yeah.
Your problem is seeing that video, right? I mean, you form such a strong opinion based on that video that it is really cascading through the rest of your answers.
I think that anyone who saw that video had a reaction,
Okay.
right?
And I know we all want to be fair, right? We want to say that we're going to be a good juror. But again, I don't,
No, that's right. You don't know.
And we need to be certain of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'll just ask you one last time. Can you?
I can, even though it pains me to say, I can.
Fair enough. If I may have a moment, Your Honor. All right. So, sir, if you were to ultimately find a not guilty verdict, how do you think that would affect, well, how do I phrase this? Your wife and you share some views, right? Could you go home after finding a not guilty verdict, and how could you explain that to your wife?
I absolutely could. Yeah.
You could?
Yes. Yes.
All right. No further questions. We'll exercise the peremptory, Your Honor.
Let me talk briefly. All right. Juror 39, we're going to excuse you from this case. And so the deputy will collect some of the material from you, and then you'll be released. You have no further jury service on this charge.
Okay. Thank you.
And hold off bringing anybody else in. All right, we are outside the presence of the juror. The defense made a peremptory challenge. The state followed with a Batson challenge and stated, maybe Mr. Schlischer, you can make a record of what your offer was, which I found was not a prima facie showing.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. The state did, as the court indicated, issue a Batson challenge to the defense's peremptory challenge of juror number 39. The articulated basis for the Batson challenge is that the prospective juror identifies as Hispanic. We believe that the prospective juror stated an unequivocal ability to follow the law, follow the court's instruction, presume innocence, and not express any views that were outside of what other seated jurors have expressed.
All right, I would note, first of all, that you're telling the court the standard for a challenge for cause. This is not a challenge for cause. I don't find that this was race-based. This juror was very torn, you could tell, and he had difficulty coming to ultimately what I think Mr. Nelson was trying to get to was a challenge for cause, that he could not presume innocence. It was difficult for him to get there. It was difficult for him to get beyond the videotape because he likened it, unlike any other potential juror, to a World War II occupation fort. His wife has engaged in went with protests. That does not by itself. He did not participate. So that's not a significant factor, but I can see why the close relationship with somebody who is deeply involved and his opinions regarding the defendant as expressed in the questionnaire give the defense a race neutral reason for their strike. And I don't think the state has made a prima facie case. I would note for the record that we have 6 jurors so far. They identify as follows from the jury records. 1 is multiracial, 3 are white, 1 is Hispanic, and one is black. So I see no pattern whatsoever from the defense of striking racial minorities. So I don't think that supports the state's challenge either. So that's court's ruling. We'll bring in the next juror. Thank you. All right, we're jury number 40. Okay, come on up. And you are juror number 40, is that correct?
I am.
All right. Couple things before I turn you over to the attorneys for questioning. First of all, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right, thank you. First thing I'm going to do is ask you about the questionnaire. You filled out a questionnaire. Thank you for taking the time to do that. Is there anything as you sit here right now, since it's been several months, that you think you would change or add to, or even some opinions that you might change because perhaps your opinion has evolved over the last few months?
I don't think so. Although I was kind of trying to remember the questionnaire and my answers, and so
Okay,
it's been a while.
I'm going to ask you to pull up just a little
Sorry.
bit.
Okay.
And also, we are exercising COVID precautions. I'm going to keep my mask on. We have plexiglass between us, and you also have plexiglass between you and the attorneys. So I do allow in this circumstance if you would like to take off your mask, but I leave it to you. Sometimes the mask makes it a little harder to understand people, but I leave it to your discretion as far as keeping it on or off.
Okay.
Any changes or additions to the questionnaire that you're aware of?
Not that I can think of. No.
And again, it's been a long time. The attorneys might point to specific answers you gave because I assume you didn't keep a copy of your
I
questionnaire.
did not. Yeah.
So to refresh your memory, they may go to a question and read it over, including your answer. If your answer today is different, don't worry about it. What we want more than anything is your honest, candid answers to the questions.
Okay.
Also, the questionnaire advises you not to read any articles or pay attention to any media. But we realize that in the months since then, inadvertently, you may have come across some information. You see a headline or a friend talks to you about the case, and we told you don't tell anybody you're a juror, so you can't exactly stop them. Anything like that happened to you that added to your knowledge of the case?
No, I would say not that added to my knowledge. No.
Okay, anything about the facts of the case or the participants or pretrial matters that have been litigated, anything like that?
No.
Okay. The whole point of this is there's a variety of things that you know about the case, and you may have formed certain opinions about the case. And we want to make sure that if you sit as a juror, you decide this case only on the evidence and on the law that I give you, and that you put aside anything you know about the case, put aside any opinions about the case, and just take the evidence as it comes. Do you think you could do that?
I do.
Okay. You're given a long list of witnesses. Did you recognize anybody on the list?
There's one name, kind of a common name. So David Elm might have been I think it was a student maybe years ago.
Okay. I'm not sure that person's participation in the case, but if that person appears, how long ago was this person a student?
10 years ago.
Okay.
For- Yeah.
Whatever their occupation is or whatever their role in this case, do you think that would affect your ability to weigh them dispassionately and neutrally?
No, because I really don't. I recognize the name, but I don't really remember the person very much.
Okay, and so you could treat them like any other witness as far as weighing their credibility.
Absolutely.
Okay. We've also had an estimate of the trial length would be, if you were on this jury, we would excuse you and you could go about your business until March 29th, and then come back. We would start trial. We anticipate 4 weeks. And I think you may have indicated some concern the length of the trial.
So as a teacher, I'm concerned about my students, but I have made arrangements for substitutes as needed. So
Okay, so you could make it work.
yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions for me before I turn you over to the attorneys?
Nothing I can think of.
All right, with that, regarding juror number 40, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So that microphone unfortunately doesn't pull closer to you, so I think you
Okay.
gotta move in.
All right.
And with your mask on, it's fine to keep it on, but obviously makes it a little bit more difficult to hear, excuse me. So what I'm gonna do, sir, is I'm gonna ask you a series of some kind of general questions first. And then from there, I'd like to ask you some specific questions about some answers in your questionnaire, okay?
Okay.
Now, I know it was a long time ago, and you probably haven't read it. You didn't keep a copy.
Right.
Nobody's trying to trick you. We'll read it to you, refresh your recollection a little, okay?
Okay.
All right. So first question I have is, if you and I were to meet in some social circumstance, whether it be a party or an event of some sort, what are a few things that you would want me to know, or what are a few things I would learn about you in that conversation?
I'm a husband and dad. I'm a teacher. I love singing in my church choir with my wife. A musician.
Okay. Are you a musician in ways other than with your voice? Do you play instruments?
I don't play instruments. I'm a singer and a music teacher.
Okay, perfect. And it's my understanding of the process that at some point you received a letter in the mail that said you were going to be summoned for jury duty. That was the first sort of notification, right?
Yes.
When you received that first notification, what was your first reaction?
Oh my.
Okay. Why?
Well, I mean, I know that it's a case that it's a large magnitude, and it's honestly a little nerve-wracking.
Okay.
But I gave it some thought and recognized that it's my duty to try to serve jury duty as needed.
Okay. And so you had that thought when you learned that it was this particular case, right? Because is that when you learned it was this particular case when you got this big questionnaire in the mail?
I think that's what, yeah, it was a questionnaire, right?
Right. Okay. And how did you feel today when you got here to the government center?
A little nervous. I can stand up and sing in front of a group of people and be comfortable, but talking in front of people and stuff is nerve-wracking.
Sure. Fair enough. I assure you, I don't want to trade roles with you. I don't think you'd appreciate that. But the security and the fortifications, you said that made you kind of nervous, or just being in this room, I guess?
I know the process more, actually the security made me, that felt good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because I know you've expressed some concerns about anonymity and things of that nature in your questionnaire. And so you were concerned about it, and seeing those preparations made you feel safe.
That's correct.
And then ultimately, this afternoon when the judge kind of gave us the instructions or gave you the instructions about how we're doing everything we can to maintain your anonymity at this point. How did that make you feel?
I mean, good. I still have a little bit of concern about, after the trial, if when our names are released.
Okay.
I know sometimes they're not. I don't know how that works, but.
Okay. So at some point they may be though, too, right?
Right.
We don't know what the future will hold, but at some point they may be. Why does that make you nervous?
I mean, it can potentially draw some unwanted attention. I don't know.
Are you thinking more in terms of harassment or potential harassment, or are you thinking more in terms of physical safety, like violence that could be visited upon you?
I guess I'm just thinking in terms of people wanting information and that kind of thing.
Okay. So no concerns for your physical safety, just more concerns. You just kind of want to be anonymous.
Yeah, I would say my wife has more concerns about physical
Okay.
safeties, but yeah.
So and perfectly natural. You've talked about this with your wife, right?
Yes.
And you said she has some more concerns about your physical safety.
Yeah.
Do you think that's justified on her part?
I mean, I've tried to convince her that I don't think that that's a probability or an issue.
Okay. Have you been successful in your convincing?
I guess that's fine. I was gonna say the jury's still out, but
Okay. Well, let me ask you just some kind of other general questions. Can you think of a situation in your life where you have been called upon to resolve a dispute between two people?
sure.
Okay. Now, just thinking about that in your mind, without any real details, how did you approach that situation, and what did you do to try to resolve that dispute?
I'm thinking of some students, and so brought them together and actually first heard kind of each of their stories from their own perspective, and then brought them together and encouraged them to talk through and get out.
In terms of being a juror, right? I mean, this is in some regard part of what your job would be as you analyze the evidence in the case. Disputes may arise, right? In the jury room, a piece of evidence may to one juror seem to be very important and not to another, right?
Sure.
So in that jury room, there may be disputes. And ultimately, that's what this case is about too, right? It's a dispute. There's two different perspectives or two sides of the story. So what tools would you bring as a juror in those two scenarios, both in terms of resolving disputes among jurors, as well as analyzing the evidence? And that's a really long, complicated question, and I'm sorry.
I mean, I guess I have a pretty calm demeanor and can try to encourage people to listen to each other and try to explain their points of view to the best extent possible.
Okay. Do you think that there are things in terms of the analysis of the evidence? How would you resolve a dispute over evidence? Right, like if
I guess I haven't thought about it. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, let me try to give you a simple hypothetical. Say that there is some piece of evidence, and we'll just pick a number, a lab report, right? And you're looking at this lab report and you're saying, I think that this is a really important piece of information. But somebody else goes, that's nonsense. We don't need to worry about that, right? How do you, something that's important to you is not important to someone else. How do you resolve that?
Kind of make a list of pros and cons as to why it's valuable and why it seems important.
Okay. And in terms of you understand that a jury decision in this type of a case has to be unanimous?
Mhm.
That's a yes.
Yes,
And that means all 12 people have to agree,
right.
right? So if you're looking at this piece of evidence, right, and the majority of the group is saying, ignore it, quit, it's not important, it's not important. Are you the type of person that would just simply kind of follow along with everyone else? Or would you say, no, this is really important and you need to hear me and speak your mind?
Probably the latter.
Okay. You're going to hear my opinion type of a guy?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now, can you think of a situation in your personal life where you've had to decide between two stories, which person is telling the truth about a story?
I'm not coming up with anything specifically right now.
Sure. You have some grown children, right?
Yes,
And at some point in their adolescence or young adulthood, perhaps your children had two very different stories about something that happened.
actually, I can't think of any circumstances like that.
All right. Well,
It might be my perspective might have been different than theirs.
Okay. Well, let's just kind of take it in the hypothetical then. How do you tell if someone is telling the truth?
I mean, you listen to what they're saying, you pay attention to how they're doing it. If there's other people that can corroborate, that all comes into play.
Okay. So now let's take it in a little broader lens. What if two witnesses are looking at that same story, that same incident, right? That same thing. They're watching it happen. They're standing right next to each other. And one of them says, this is what happened. And the other says, this is what happened, right? And they're nowhere close to each other. How do you reconcile it? Same process or?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just have to kind of keep trying to find new ways to express what they're seeing and see if they can come to some sort of understanding that they can both agree upon.
Okay. Can you think of a circumstance in your life, either personally or professionally, where you were 100% convinced of something and it later turned out you were wrong?
I'm sure it's happened.
Okay. Are you the type of person who can reflect back and say, I made a mistake, I'm going to learn from it? Or are you kind of the person that brushes it aside? And
Oh, no, definitely. I've learned a lot from mistakes.
great. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions about your responses. And again, I'll read you what you wrote. So no tricks afoot here. Okay. The first question that you're asked in the questionnaire is what you remember seeing about this incident in either the media or in conversation, your general knowledge about this particular case. Okay. Now, before I go down this path, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. A video, you may describe this video, was taken by a bystander. That video was uploaded to a social media platform, went viral, and became news, right?
Yes,
Have you seen that video?
yes.
Okay. And I think you said you've seen it 6 or more times.
I'm guessing that's about right. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess my question is in that 6 or more times, when you learned of this video, did you go onto a social media platform or some other website and watch the video from start to finish? Or are you referring to smaller clips and segments?
I mean, the first few times, I think it was just the smaller clips. And then there was one time where I saw a longer segment.
Okay. Like, have you seen any other videos of this incident that have been made publicly available?
I feel like there was one that was like from an angle. Uh, yeah,
Okay. Do you
but
remember
I don't
seeing?
remember much of it.
Do you remember seeing any like body cameras, police officers, security footage, or anything of that nature?
I'm sorry, that's what I'm not sure of what the other angle was. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But so this longer video that you watched, you watched that more than 6 times, or was that just once?
No, just once. Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask you, you wrote kind of a long, you tried to remember everything that you had heard about this case. And you had a lot more than just this incident, right? About the people involved and all of that. So are you a fairly regular consumer of the news?
Yeah.
By television, newspaper?
So NPR, and we get the newspaper and we watch the news pretty regularly. Yeah.
Okay. So you wrote a little bit about the charges initially, or what you recalled to be the charges, right? And then you recall reading some article that Mr. Floyd and Mr. Chauvin had worked together in some location, right? And you also heard that Mr. Floyd didn't want to get into the squad car because he was claustrophobic.
Right.
You also recall hearing something about conflicting autopsy reports as to whether Floyd had drugs in his system.
Well, I don't know if it was about that or if it was just kind of different conclusions, and I don't remember exactly what those were. But.
Okay. And then you recall reading some information about Mr. Chauvin's personal, like divorce and some other things he has going on, right?
Yes.
So you have, and you're probably one of the few people that kind of went beyond just this incident last year in May, right? And I just kind of wanted to ask you some questions about that. Do you understand that in this trial, evidence will be presented in this courtroom, right?
Yes.
And some of the things that you reference in here, obviously you've heard about them, you've read about these things, that may not be evidence in this case.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Can you set those things that you've heard in the news aside and judge the case on the evidence in the courtroom?
You always have to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Right. What do you mean? What do you mean take it with a grain of salt? What do you have to take?
Well, I mean, when there's ongoing investigations and information coming forth, as information comes out, later it may not be accurate. And
okay. The question asked you, from what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? To which your response, or what you chose, was very negative. And when asked, "Do you feel that way?" you wrote, "Seeing the look on Chauvin's face in the video and seeing the other officers and him ignoring pleas of bystanders to stop once he was on the ground and subdued."
yeah, that was difficult.
Okay. Why was that difficult?
When you see somebody who is already subdued, it seemed very unnecessary and over the top to me.
You mentioned kind of earlier in terms of dispute resolution is the importance of hearing both sides, right?
Yeah.
Would you agree that there's probably more information that will come out in this courtroom not learned?
Of course.
And some of that information will be relevant to perhaps police training or other aspects of law enforcement that may shape. Would you be willing to allow that information to change your initial perception?
Yeah, I mean, if that potentially, sure.
Okay. Well, you understand, again, Mr. Chauvin is presumed innocent of these
Yep.
charges. And you formed an, and it's you're not the first person to come in here and have a negative opinion of the case, right? So again, it's perfectly acceptable. They're your views and you're entitled to hold your views. The question is, can you set aside your views and judge this case on the evidence and the law as it's presented in court?
Yes, I think I can.
Right? So you think you can or you can. There's a difference.
Yes, I can.
Okay. You had the question was asked of you of your impression of Mr. Floyd. You checked it was neutral, and you said, I don't know much about him besides what I saw in the video. I understand he has a record and he may have tried to buy something at Cup Foods with possibly a fake bill, but he shouldn't have been treated that way for that. Right?
Yeah.
So again, can you at least acknowledge that you formed your impression about Mr. Floyd is certainly in response to how you viewed he was treated by the Minneapolis police officers?
Well, based on what I saw in the video and such, yeah.
Okay. You were asked if you've talked about Mr. Floyd's death with your family, friends, or coworkers, or discussed it online, for example, on social media, and you checked yes. And it was asked, if yes, what opinions have you expressed? You wrote, Floyd had a record but didn't deserve to die from this by a cop who is supposed to serve and protect, who ignored his pleas that he couldn't breathe. Chauvin should have stopped. The other officers should have intervened, as I think one tried. And maybe it goes on. That was the end.
As I think, what was the last part?
I think one tried.
Oh, right.
Okay. So I guess again, you have formed a very strong opinion. Agreed?
Yeah.
Right. You've expressed it kind of in three different ways in response to three different questions, right?
Mhm.
I'm sorry,
Yes,
is that a
sorry.
yes? It's okay. And are you convinced that you can set aside your very strong opinions, presume Mr. Chauvin innocent, and analyze this case on the facts and evidence as presented in court?
Yes, because I think you have to approach it with a blank slate and start all over.
So you were asked a question about the protests that occurred after the death of Mr. Floyd. You wrote that the protests solidified people around the need for change in our police and our society's systemic racism. The vandalism by Boogaloo Boys and others was very distressing.
Yes.
Okay. And you underlined the word need in your sentence, solidified people around the need for change in our police.
Yes.
Okay. So you have an opinion about Mr. Chauvin, right? Again, nothing wrong with that. And you also have a pretty strong opinion that there needs to be change or police reform.
Yes, I mean, I think that's even been noted by the head of the police.
Okay.
Mr. Nelson, I think we're going to take our afternoon break.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
sir, I'm going to ask you to go back to the courtroom. Deputy will direct you. We'll be on break until 3:30. Thank you.